Anita's life was a story of silent suffering. A young girl forced to wake before dawn, dressed in tattered clothes, to scrub floors and cook meals in a house that wasn't hers. Despite her brilliance, she attended school late, often hungry, while her cousin lived in luxury. Unloved, mistreated, and believing she'd been abandoned by her own mother, Anita endured years of cruelty with a smile. But behind her quiet resilience lay a truth that would shake her world and bring her face to face with a betrayal too cruel to imagine. This is Anita's journey, a tale of pain, sacrifice, and ultimate redemption. Anita Village was a patchwork of earthy tones and vibrant greenery, a place where life was simple but unforgiving. The dirt roads were lined with small mud brick houses, their thatched roofs sagging from years of weathering storms. Children played barefoot in the streets, their laughter echoing against the backdrop of women balancing baskets of goods on their heads. Life here revolved around survival, and every day was a test of resilience. The Ueka family lived on the outskirts of the village in a modest home. The house, built with mud bricks and a tin roof that creaked in the wind, was both a sanctuary and a constant reminder of their poverty. Inside, the walls were bare except for a calendar from 2 years ago, faded with time. In one corner lay Mr. Ueka, the family patriarch, who had been bedridden for years after suffering a stroke. His once strong frame, which had been the pride of his days as a blacksmith, was now frail and weak. His wife, Iziegbe, was the pillar of the household. Every morning she rose before the sun, her back bent with the weight of responsibility. She owned a small provision shop in the market, selling essentials like salt, sugar, and matches. The shop barely made enough to feed the family, but Iziegbe refused to give up. Her determination kept the household running, even as she juggled caring for her husband and managing her 3 children. Osas, the eldest daughter, was headstrong and pragmatic, often clashing with her mother over money. "Mama, why do we keep giving credit at the shop? People never pay us back," she would argue, her frustration evident. Junior, the middle child, was quieter, often lost in his own world of drawing shapes in the dirt or reading borrowed books. But it was Ivy, the youngest, who brought light to the family. At 14, she was the epitome of hope and determination. Ivy loved school with a passion that was rare in the village. Despite her tattered uniform and worn-out sandals, she was the brightest student in her class. Her teachers often called her a prodigy, and the villagers admired her drive. "Education is my way out," Ivy would say, her eyes gleaming with determination. "I'll become a doctor and take Papa to the best hospital." Her father's condition pained her deeply. Every evening, she sat by his bedside, holding his hand. "Papa, I promise to make you better," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. One humid morning, as Ivy hawked plantains along the dusty roads, she encountered a boy pushing a wheelbarrow full of yams. He had a lean frame and a friendly face, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Plantains for yams?" he teased, stopping to rest the wheelbarrow. Ivy raised an eyebrow. "Are your yams golden? If not, I'll pass." The boy laughed. "I'm Nosa. And you?" "Ivy." That brief encounter marked the beginning of a friendship that would change Ivy's life. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed more frequently. Nosa was an orphan who lived with his aging grandmother. To support her, he pushed his wheelbarrow through the village, selling yams. Despite his hardships, he had an infectious optimism that drew Ivy to him. They began meeting by the riverbank after their chores. The river was their escape, a place where the world's troubles seemed to melt away. They skipped stones, laughed at each other's jokes, and shared their dreams. "Ivy, one day, I'll go to school. I'll learn to write my name and read books like you," Nosa said, his voice filled with hope. "And I'll be a doctor," Ivy replied, her tone equally determined. We'll both escape this life. Their bond grew deeper with each meeting. What started as friendship blossomed into a tender love. Nosa became Ivy's confidant, her anchor in a world that often felt overwhelming. The days grew harder for the Iweka family as Mr. Iweka's health deteriorated. His voice, once commanding and warm, had become a faint whisper. His once strong hands now trembled when he tried to lift them. Ivy spent every evening by his side, reading aloud from her school books, or simply sitting in silence, holding his hand. One evening, as the crickets chirped outside, he mustered his strength to speak. "Ivy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're special. Promise me you won't stop dreaming." Tears welled up in Ivy's eyes. "I promise, Papa. I'll make you proud." A week later, Mr. Iweka passed away peacefully in his sleep. His death left a void in the family. Iziegbe threw herself into her work, refusing to let grief slow her down. Osas grew angrier, often lashing out about the unfairness of life. Junior became even more withdrawn, spending hours drawing pictures of their father. Ivy, however, clung to the promise she had made. She worked harder than ever in school, determined to honor her father's memory. Her bond with Nosa became her solace, the one thing that brought her comfort. Months after her father's death, Ivy began feeling unwell. She often woke up nauseous and struggled to keep her energy up. At first, she dismissed it as stress, but when her symptoms persisted, her mother noticed. "Ivy," Iziegbe said one evening, her tone firm. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Tears filled Ivy's eyes. "Mama, I'm pregnant." Iziegbe's heart sank. She sat down beside Ivy, taking her hand. "Who is the father?" "Nosa," Ivy replied, her voice trembling. "It's Nosa." The next day, they went to Nosa's home to inform his grandmother. But when they arrived, the air was heavy with grief. Nosa had been killed in a tragic accident. A truck had veered off the road, striking him as he sold yams. Ivy collapsed to the ground, her sobs shaking her body. The boy who had been her anchor, her love, was gone. Despite her grief, Ivy found strength in the life growing inside her. Months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Anita, after Nosa's late mother. Anita became Ivy's reason to keep going. Life wasn't easy. Ivy returned to hawking, often carrying Anita on her back as she walked the dusty streets. Her voice rang out, "Plantains, fresh plantains." Even as the sun beat down on her, she remained determined to give Anita a better life. 2 years had passed since Anita's birth. Ivy was working harder than ever to make ends meet, but the weight of raising a child alone was taking its toll. The village had grown smaller in her eyes, and Ivy felt trapped. One afternoon, as she stood in the market selling plantains, she overheard a conversation that made her heart skip a beat. "There's a family in the city looking for a nanny," one of the women said. "They pay well, and the position includes room and board." Ivy's mind raced. A job in the city would mean steady income, enough to give Anita a better life. But leaving her daughter behind was unthinkable. That evening, she brought the idea up to her family during dinner. "I can't keep doing this," Ivy said, her voice trembling. "This job could be the opportunity we need." Iziegbe nodded thoughtfully. "It's a good idea, but what about Anita? Who will care for her?" "I can," Osas offered, her tone calm and confident. "Bring Anita to live with me in the city. I'll look after her while you work." Ivy hesitated. Though she loved her sister, doubts lingered. Could Osas, who was now married and raising her own daughter, truly give Anita the care she deserved? But Osas reassured her. "Trust me, Ivy. I'll treat her like my own child." After a night of agonizing deliberation, Ivy agreed. The next day, she packed Anita's few belongings, holding her daughter close as tears streamed down her face. I'm doing this for us, Ivy whispered. I promise I'll come back for you. The city was a world unlike anything Ivy had ever known. Tall buildings towered over bustling streets, where cars honked incessantly and vendors called out to passers-by. Ivy arrived at her new employer's house, a sprawling mansion with polished floors, chandeliers, and rooms larger than her entire home in the village. Her employers, a wealthy couple with twin daughters, greeted her warmly. Despite her initial nervousness, Ivy quickly adapted to her role. She cared for the twins with patience and kindness, earning the trust and affection of the entire family. Her employers praised her dedication, often telling her she was the best nanny they'd ever hired. Months turned into years. Ivy sent money and gifts home regularly, believing Anita was being cared for. She often asked Osas for updates. Anita is doing well, Osas would say over the phone. She's in school, and she misses you. Ivy's heart ached with every call, but she comforted herself with the thought that she was building a better future for her daughter. While Ivy worked tirelessly in the city, Anita's reality was far from what her mother imagined. Osas had accepted Ivy's money, but used it to fund her own lavish lifestyle. Anita, instead of being treated as a member of the family, was relegated to the role of a servant. Every morning, Anita woke up before dawn to clean the house, prepare breakfast, and take care of her cousin, Isakin. By the time she reached school, if she made it at all, she was already exhausted. Isakin, spoiled and entitled, treated Anita with disdain. "You're just the maid," she sneered one afternoon. "Don't forget your place." Despite the mistreatment, Anita remained resilient. She excelled in her government school, her intelligence shining through even as she wore tattered uniforms and borrowed books. Teachers often praised her, amazed at how well she performed despite her circumstances. Osas was careful to maintain the illusion of a loving caregiver. She sent Ivy staged photos of Anita, dressed in borrowed clothes, smiling for the camera. Occasionally, she made Anita pose beside expensive toys, only to snatch them away once the photos were taken. "Your daughter is doing so well," Osas would say during their calls. "Look at this picture I sent. She loves the doll you bought her." Ivy, unaware of the truth, worked harder, often taking on extra duties to send more money. Her guilt for being away fueled her determination to provide for Anita, never realizing the betrayal unfolding behind her back. As the years went by, Ivy began to notice inconsistencies. Whenever she asked to speak to Anita directly, Osas had an excuse. "She's busy with homework," Osas would say. "Or she's out playing with friends." Ivy's unease grew, but she convinced herself that Osas was simply busy. However, the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, as she sat alone in her room, Ivy made a decision. She would return home unannounced to see Anita with her own eyes. When Ivy arrived at Osas's house, her heart sank at what she saw. The once lavish home was now in disrepair, the furniture worn and the walls stained. But nothing prepared her for the sight of Anita. Her daughter was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor in tattered clothes. Her hair was unkempt, and her thin frame spoke of years of neglect. Ivy froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Anita!" she called, rushing forward. Anita looked up, confusion etched on her face. She didn't recognize her mother. "Who are you?" Anita asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your mother," Ivy said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." Osas appeared, her face pale with shock. "Ivy, what are you doing here? What is this?" Ivy demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "Why is my daughter like this?" Osas stammered, trying to fabricate excuses, but Ivy saw through the lies. The betrayal was too great to ignore. Over the next few weeks, Ivy worked tirelessly to rebuild her relationship with Anita. She explained the years of deception. apologizing for trusting Osas and promising to make things right. At first, Anita was hesitant. Years of neglect had left scars, and she struggled to trust her mother. But Ivy's unwavering love began to break down her walls. Slowly, mother and daughter began to reconnect. Ivy decided to take Anita back to the city and later abroad. For the first time, Anita experienced the warmth of a mother's love and the opportunities she had long dreamed of. Years later, a humbled Osas reached out, seeking forgiveness. Though hesitant, Anita agreed to meet her aunt. Their reunion was emotional, filled with tears and regret. "I'm sorry," Osas said. "I was wrong. I failed you." Anita forgave her, not out of obligation, but because she had learned the power of letting go. Forgiveness, she realized, was the key to her own healing. Anita thrived in her new life. She excelled academically, eventually pursuing a career in child advocacy. Inspired by her own experiences, she dedicated her life to helping children who faced neglect and hardship. Ivy and Anita's bond grew stronger with each passing year. Their journey became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of love, and the importance of forgiveness. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please support my growth by subscribing to my channel. Your support means everything to me, and it helps me share more stories like this. Also, don't forget to like and comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts.